here's a look at how the whole thing played out. The Hornets and Trailblazers, they have the same chance as the Spurs at landing the top pick. They've got number 2 and number 3, respectively. The Pistons have the 5 pick for the second straight year. The Magic will pick twice in the top 11, number 6 and a number 11, thanks to a trade deadline deal with the Bulls 2 years ago. And that's a look at your lottery draft order. And hey there, welcome to CBS Sports HQ. Russ Thaler here with your post-lottery NBA mock draft special. And I'm joined by Adam Finkelstein in studio. We got Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander with us, as well as Avery Johnson, the coach. And look, guys, we finally know who's going to have the top pick. We know Greg Popovich is a happy man tonight, and everybody in San Antonio is a happy man tonight. And Gary, as we start this mock draft, I'm pretty sure we all know who's going number 1, right?
It will be Victor Wembanyama, the French sensation, 7'5" shot creator and rim protector. He has been described as, the best teenage basketball prospect we've ever seen, and I really don't think there is a better spot for him to land than San Antonio, Texas. Avery and I talked about this earlier in the day. If the goal is for Victor Wembanyama to win as many games as he can in the 2023-24 season as a rookie, there were better places to go than San Antonio. But that organization, that franchise is so organized and disciplined and focused and mature. They know exactly how to handle elite prospects. That is the franchise that turned David Robinson, or at least helped turn David Robinson into a Hall of Famer, Tim Duncan into a Hall of Famer, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard someday will be in the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame. And now, for Victor to be able to go as a 19-year-old and work under Greg Popovich in that franchise is really, really fortunate for him, because there are some franchises that have a history of screwing special talents up. San Antonio is not on that list. He should be phenomenal there.
This guy is so good. He might be the only guy that I would be willing to take my number 6 jersey down that's retired in the rafters at the Spurs arena. If he want to wear number 6, I'll loan it to him for a few years, because as Gary said, just a generational talent. Spurs fans are so excited. My phone is going crazy right now. Sean Elliott, my old teammate, who calls a lot of the Spurs games, he works as an analyst for the local broadcast. He's excited. I've talked to Spurs PR guys that are in New York, Tom James. So again, this city's going crazy. I saw photos or videos of Spurs fans at a watch party, and restaurants are upside down. You may see parades and parties on the street. So this is how good this guy is, man. Is really giving the Spurs some hope. They've had a long couple of years, and now they feel like they're back, not to championship form, but they're back to being a respectable team, and they'll continue to add to Wemby's with him on the roster. So Spurs fans are just going crazy right now. My phone's about to explode.
Yeah, the question is Greg Popovich going to be coaching at 80 years old? Because when you get a prospect like this, obviously, and with the idea that San Antonio isn't expected to turn around and be an immediate force in the NBA next season, but the prospect of Wembanyama being the centerpiece of what could be a true franchise rebirth is obviously very exciting. I'll simply say this. We have an entire podcast episode already dedicated in the Eye on College Basketball feed on Victor Wembanyama, myself, and our lead NBA draft expert, Kyle Boone, who was in the room tonight when San Antonio won. Go seek that out. It's a deep dive. Purely this. At this point, Wembanyama's hype, I remember LeBron James getting drafted 20 years ago. I remember Cleveland winning the lottery. This meets that from a hype standpoint. I don't happen to believe that Wembanyama is a better prospect now than LeBron James was then, but he's obviously the closest thing. And he does things on the basketball floor that we just have never seen before. He is obviously so tantalizing, so tempting. Can't wait to see what happens. But as we put him number 1 here, I do want to at least bring a little bit of realism and history and precedent into this conversation. His ceiling is Hall of Fame. He's already being discussed before he's played a minute at the NBA level of being a guy who, if it all works out, no doubt about it, he's going to the Hall of Fame. But slender frame, super tall, yes, he has a skill set and a combination between size and athleticism we've never seen before, but I want to reinforce this. It's not a 100% thing that he is going to work out. I almost worry that we are already too eager to crown Victor Wembanyama as a surefire 10-time All-Star. I would love to see that happen, but it's a physical game. He's going to increase his workload. I think San Antonio is a great place for him to go. I hope it works out. But traditionally, players that are 7'3", 7'4", 7'5", it has been hit or miss. But I say that with the caveat, there's nobody that's ever looked like Victor Wembanyama upon entering the NBA.
So a couple things on that. I think as far as his physical durability goes, I think that's been a known question mark for years. And I think his camp has already tailored the way that he's trained in order to prepare for that. Wemby spent time in Dallas, actually, just a few hours north of San Antonio. He's been in Germany working with some of the same trainers that Dirk Nowitzki did. So everything has been very deliberate, very strategic, because they know durability is ultimately going to be maybe the only question, certainly the biggest question. But to Matt's point, I think that all of the hype is really off the charts right now. I mean, I've seen people say, the best prospect ever. I mean, this kid's 19 years old, and he is, in fact, something we've never seen before. 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan, dominant defensive tools and offensive skill and mobility at that size, which is just an incredible, totally unprecedented combination. But we've got 2 decades left to see what comes of that. Another thing I'd like to point out here, the Spurs front office went all in on this, and they did it for multiple years, even after the NBA changed the rules and they changed the weight that every team was assigned in the lottery itself. So you used to have a much better chance of winning the lottery the worse you were, but it led to so much tanking that the NBA changed the odds. Nobody had more than a 14% chance today, and that deviated the strategy of a lot of teams, not the Spurs. They stayed committed to this process. They considered Wemby to be too good to minimize any chance of getting him, and it ultimately paid off for them.
I understand the Spurs have a new practice facility coming up as well, worth about $500 million. So Wembanyama is going to be coming in with some state-of-the-art stuff. Look, this is the surest of sure things, the #1 pick. And after #1, Gary, it seems like that's where it starts to get a little bit muddy. We hear a couple of names being thrown about as to who could go #2. Who do you have going #2 to the Hornets?
I have Brandon Miller going 2nd overall to the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm not a big believer in drafting for positional need this high in a draft. I think you should always take best player available, almost without exception. But when the prospects under consideration are similar in terms of evaluation, not similar players, not similar heights, similar anything like that, but just you don't know if there's much difference between them as prospects, then I think you can start to look at your own roster and maybe go a different direction, a direction of need. And obviously in Charlotte, they have a point guard in LaMelo Ball. That would not completely rule out Scoot Henderson for me, but it does slightly tip the scales to Brandon Miller, who is a wing with size who can obviously make shots from all over the court. Shot above 38% from 3 this season. And if you watch these playoffs, you know that nothing is more valued these days than shooting, and non-shooters can really become problematic for you. Scoot Henderson at this point in his career is considered a non-shooter, or at least a below-average shooter. Now, to be clear, the position he plays, you can be great as a non-shooter at that position, but obviously having shooting all over the court is extremely advantageous, and Brandon Miller, I think, helps provide that, not only for LaMelo Ball, but for that Charlotte franchise in general.
The way that the game has been scouted, played, developed, drafted at the NBA level over the past 30 years has evolved really since the inception. But I can speak with a high degree of confidence that for the next 70 years, players that are built and resemble Brandon Miller's game are going to be top 5 NBA picks. I mean, he's 6'9", ultra athletic, super long wingspan, great shooter, can shoot from deep, can get to the hole. Obviously, Brandon Miller had quite the controversial back half of his season at Alabama, but he is going through the process of being vetted, and that is a deep dive by every franchise that will be in position to take him or trade up and get him for his overall game. And why it works for Charlotte would be intriguing, because I think they need someone that has his kind of scoring ability, and it certainly could be a case here where he showed a lot of dynamism at the college level, good shooting ability. I think there's actually a lot of upside on the defensive end. And for the amount of capability he has as a catch and shoot kind of scorer, I actually think there's a lot more developmentally that he can grow into. You talk to people around the league and they see Brandon Miller as the kind of player who can grow into a potential top 5, top 7 scorer in the NBA level. That's, again, if he hits. That's why he's being talked at the as being a number 2 pick here. After there wasn't a ton of noise on this in the first half of the college season, but as we've gotten closer and closer, he's really made that debate with Scoot Henderson a real debate, and I think this would be a wonderful fit.
Yeah, I agree with the guys. Brandon Miller, I have him as the second best player in the draft. And there were some conversations early in the season, when he had some of his outstanding games that, this kid could have been talked about as a number 1 pick potentially. But Wembanyama is the guy, unbelievable talent. But Brandon Miller is a kid that can do it all, play at all 3 levels, prototypical body, as Matt shared, play at all 3 levels. He's got that nice spot-up jump shot. He'll improve his ball handling ability. I think he has the capability and the instincts to be a good defensive player and not just be a one-way offensive player that teams like to seek out and force switches on the defensive end. But this kid is very impressive. And from what I've heard, talking to some of my contacts at Alabama, where I used to coach, he's a gym rat. He loves to work. He loves to put in the time. And I think not only the fit, but I believe he's the second best player in the draft. And he'll be the guy that Michael Jeffrey Jordan will choose with the number 2 pick.
Yeah, Michael Jordan, I'm sure, was hoping to get that number 1 pick. Brandon Miller might not be a bad consolation prize. As you mentioned, Matt, the vetting is now going on in a big way with Miller, especially with the news of Ja Morant's been in the news with gun issues. Miller's issue was a gun issue in the second half of the season. We shouldn't just brush past that, so I'll put it out there, and we'll see what all the teams come up with. Let's move to the number 3 pick because it was Scoot Henderson, whose name came up a lot for number 2. You guys are all saying Brandon Miller at number 2. Gary, is it Henderson going 3?
I think it has to be. It's, at this point in the draft, you're taking whichever player falls to you, regardless of franchise, with few exceptions. Whichever player falls to you between Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson. In our mock draft right here, that player is Scoot Henderson. So you take him and you believe that you've got a super athletic lead guard who can play with Damian Lillard, or if you eventually move on from Damian Lillard, can take over as your primary guard for a decade plus. The shot is a little questionable in the sense that he's not a knockdown shooter, and players are going to go under screens consistently until he can make them pay. But like I said earlier, there's a long list of lead guards, even in the modern NBA, who are excellent while being below average shooters. Russell Westbrook is a guy Scoot Henderson gets compared to all the time. You can see why with these highlights. And Russell Westbrook is a 30% career three-point shooter who is a future first ballot, Naismith Memorial Hall of Famer, and a former MVP. So absolutely, if Scoot Henderson wants to maximize what he can be, that shot has got to improve. But even if it doesn't to any sort of meaningful degree, he is still such a dynamic, athletic, explosive guard that he's got a chance to be really, really special.
Yeah, I agree with GP here. I think Scoot Henderson is clearly the best talent on the board if it plays out like this. But if it does play out like this, I think the storyline becomes, what does Portland do with this pick? Dame Lillard is on the record is saying if we don't get Wemby, we should trade the pick. Dame Lillard is in win now mode. They took Shaedon Sharpe last year. He exploded in the last 15 or so games of the year once they went into full tank mode. So you've got a quality young piece. You've got Simons there who's averaging 21 points per game. So right now you have a full backcourt with those three players there. So where does Scoot Henderson fit? So I think this decision becomes, is it now time to trade Dame Lillard and go into full rebuilding mode? If not, I think Portland will look very hard at moving that pick and trying to get an asset that can pay off immediately while you're still in Dame Lillard's window. To me, this becomes one of the biggest storylines of the draft after Wemby.
Look at picks 4 through 6. It's Houston, Detroit, followed by Orlando. The Pistons were one of those teams who had that 14% chance, the highest possible percentage chance of getting the top pick. They fall to number 5. The Pistons will pick in the 5 spot for the second straight year. And welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. Russ Thaler, Adam Finkelstein here in studio. We got the coach, Avery Johnson, Gary Parrish, and Matt Norlander, our CBS Sports college basketball insiders with us, and the hosts of the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Gary, we're going to number 4. We went through the top 3. Houston has the pick. Who do you have them taking?
I am still in best player available mode, and I'm going to go with Ausar Thompson, who, of course, played for Overtime Elite. He's got a twin brother. They are both projected top 10 picks, and I think, respectfully, this is the better prospect of the two. He's a guard with size who is super athletic, a shot creator, a unique ability to deliver passes, and enough defensive versatility to guard maybe 4 different positions on that end of the court. You're probably going to hear me say this a lot over the next month as we prepare for the 2023 NBA draft. But the swing skill here is the perimeter jumper. It is not where it needs to be. There's some reason to believe it may always be an issue. But boy, just about everything else he does really well. And all of the physical gifts that you would want a top 5 pick to have, those physical gifts are there. He is a special talent and a guy who has a chance to be really, really, really good at the next level.
And you're talking about a Houston team that's got really good young pieces. They've got Jalen Green, they've got Jabari Smith, along with some others. They've got a whole boat full of guys who are 23 years old and younger. I think what this gives them is that dynamic wing who can also, as GP said, initiate offense like a guard. And let's be clear about this. He enters the NBA as one of the very best athletes in the NBA from day one. He is absolutely explosive. Now, I will say this. I think the narrative is that he is clearly ahead of his brother. Now, I talked to some NBA scouts down at the Final Four, and they saw it a little bit differently. In fact, it's Ausar, and not a men, who's been the OTE MVP 4 different times since they've been there, regular season and postseason. So that dynamic is going to be something that is interesting to watch. But I do agree this would be a terrific fit. He fits with the pieces in Houston, and they continue to develop and acquire young, high upside talent with the Rockets. And now they have a head coach who's going to bring some serious accountability.
Henderson and Thompson would be the highest picked G League players ever, should they go in those 3 and 4 spots. At number 5, it's the Detroit Pistons. Gary, who do you have them picking?
Well, first, it's just really unfortunate for Detroit that they're picking 5th as opposed to where they were slotted to actually select. So you could see Ben Wallace on that stage disappointed tonight, but still, I think they get a nice prospect here. I'll go with Jarace Walker out of Houston. You know, I worked a few Houston games on sideline for CBS Sports Network this season, and I tell you, boy, he looks different. He looks exactly like what a top 5 pick is supposed to look like. Just an incredible athlete, a really well put together body, and a guy who played a meaningful role in helping Houston secure a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. The skills still need to develop, and that's not unusual for a one-and-done prospect, but the body and the athleticism and the strength that you need to flourish in that league, Jarace Walker's got all of that stuff.
Tell you what, Jarace Walker is, to me, with what GP's laid out here with his mock, to me, he's the first player we've got to where I feel like the spectrum of what his career could be is the widest. And Finkelstein can speak to this. When I watch Jarace Walker play, and I see what he can do, and although he has some rawness to him, but I see what he's already been capable of, I actually think he is the exact kind of player where it reflects so well on the grassroots circuit that he has been able to develop into what kind of prospect he is now. In my opinion, if Jarace Walker is on the circuit 15, 20 years ago, while he still might be a top 5 pick, I just don't think he would be as refined then as he is now. And that speaks to, obviously, the coaches he's played for and how much time and dedication he has put into crafting his game. You know, he's 6'8", 240. Kelvin Sampson trusted him to take 101 threes last season, hit 35% of them. So he's got some outside range. He's listed as a power forward. it wouldn't surprise me at all if it is Detroit or just, how the game is moving. He can actually be your small ball 5 and play it well. He'll obviously be drafted with the expectation that he is a double-digit kind of rebounder. I wouldn't say that he is a sure thing to absolutely hit. I talk about this every single year on the podcast on HQ, and I'm going to repeat myself yet again. Go back and look at every single lottery in the lottery era. It is inevitable. Anywhere from 25 to 70% of the lottery, the guys just don't hit and stick. I think Walker could be vulnerable to that, but if he really continues to develop physically, there's no doubt about it. It's really him and Scoot Henderson physically in terms of development that set up as the two sure things at that, in that kind of way heading into draft night.
Yeah, just to speak to that, I think, Matt, you're 100% on. We're talking 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, and he is a full-grown man. I mean, this guy is big, he's strong, he's powerful. And in the modern NBA, he brings arguably the most versatile front court defender in this class because Matt said it. He can play the small ball 5. He's probably his best position is going to be 4, but he's somewhat switchable on the perimeter. You saw that at Houston this year. He's going to be able to switch on to guards and contain them at least off the dribble, so it's going to give flexibility in ball screen coverages. Offensively, he may not have the same ceiling as some of the prospects we've talked about so far on this show, but he's a pretty good passer at 6'8", and as you mentioned, starting to develop that shooting ability. You know the thing about him, at 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, he loves the floater. Like, that's got to go away a little bit. You just got to start to really use that physicality in his offensive game. I think if he does that, that would be a step in the right direction for him on that end of the floor.
All right, let's move on to the number 6 pick. It goes to the Orlando Magic, their first of 2 in the draft lottery. They already have the reigning Rookie of the Year in Paolo Banchero. They drafted well a year ago. Gary, who do you have them taking at number 6 in 2023?
I have him taking Anthony Black, a one-and-done point guard from Arkansas. He's 6'7", so he's a lead guard with size. And if you look at Orlando's roster, they've got 2 really nice front court pieces in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. So looking in the backcourt makes some sense to me. The 30% from 3 is obviously problematic. I wish that were a little better. But this guy is just such a nice shot creator, incredible vision. Like, he not only can make passes other guys can't make, but he can see them when they can't even see them. He's a uniquely talented one-and-done player out of Arkansas, and if he doesn't go this high in the draft, he's not going much lower than this just because of all of the things that he can do at his size, playing that lead guard position.
I agree. Eric Musselman was my last coach when I retired in 2004, so I know him very well, and I've had conversation about Anthony Black, kid who grew up, played high school ball here outside the Dallas area, so I had a chance to watch him a lot in high school. But just talented player, similar to when, if you remember when Penny Hardaway got drafted and played with Orlando back in the day, similar size. If you look at Cole Anthony and Suggs, those guys are a little bit smaller. This guy has got the wingspan, switchability on defense. Sure, as Gary alluded to, he's got to improve his outside shot. But this guy got impeccable court vision, great feel for the game. I think he pairs well with Banchero. You only need 2 really top-notch players and a bunch of role players, as we've seen with a lot of the teams that are still playing today in the NBA and the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference Finals. He can be that type of piece down the road. He still got to continue to develop, especially that outside shot. But, man, this guy's got the body. He's got the IQ. He's got the size. And I don't see him slipping past this 6th pick with Orlando.
With our post-NBA draft lottery, NBA mock draft. Here we go. Picks 7 through 10, Pacers, followed by the Wizards, then the Jazz, and the Mavs will round out the top 10. Russ Taylor back here in studio with Adam Finkelstein. We've also got Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander on the line, as well as former NBA Coach of the Year and an NBA champion with the San Antonio Spurs, who's smiling big tonight. As always, it's Avery Johnson. But we're not talking about the number 1 pick anymore. We are talking about the number 7 pick. That goes to the Indiana Pacers. Gary, who do you have?
I've got him taking Gradey Dick, the one-and-done player out of Kansas. He's a 6'8" wing. who doesn't need to improve his shot. First time I've said that all night. He's already got it. He shot above 40% from three on nearly 6 attempts per game, and was a big reason why Kansas was able to once again win a Big 12 title and secure a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Simply put, in the modern NBA, you will never regret having wings with size who can shoot it. He is a shooter. That's his greatest skill, but he's a lot more than that. He can bounce it. He can guard, maybe not at an elite level, but well enough, I think, to stay on the court. Keep in mind, Christian Braun is another player with size who shot really well from the perimeter at Kansas, and right now, as a rookie, is playing rotation minutes for the 1 seed in the West, the Denver Nuggets. Gradey Dick is equipped to do a similar thing. He's going to play major minutes for a team next season, and frankly, even though I've got him going 7th in this draft, if you just let me put together a big board, I might have him slightly higher. I'm a believer in wings who can shoot, and he is a wing who can shoot.
He is a wing who can shoot. I can't wait to talk with GP on the Eye on College Basketball podcast about Gradey Dick, because I find him to be a fascinating prospect. I find him to be someone who could conceivably go as high as 6, but if he dropped into the 12 or 13 range, it wouldn't stun me. But he's got him going here to the Pacers, and Parrish nailed it. I mean, sometimes I feel like we get too caught up, and I understand why. Like, we've got all this lead up to the draft, and basketball is a game where you can very clearly identify things that guys either really do well or don't do well. And to me, if you're drafting Gradey Dick, like, he's got the shooting form. The mechanics are great. I watched Gradey Dick play, 25-plus games and countless possessions where he simply came up big, hit a tough shot, hand in his face, 2 hands in his face, coming off screens, creating his own shot. I just saw it all season long. Like, I did not see many moments where it was like, oh, Gradey Dick, he kind of faltered there, or Gradey Dick, he felt scared, or he was timid, or he made the wrong pass. That's the other thing. He did not make a lot of bad decisions as a freshman playing with arguably the best coach in the sport. He has earned every bit of hype and pub, and the inevitable outcome of him getting picked in the lottery. I think his case might be a situation where fit will actually matter in terms of how his career takes off at the NBA level, but he's got the tools as an offensive player, and if he finds the right spot, it should not take long for him to average double-digit minutes in the NBA.
Yeah, I wonder when we're going to hit that point.
Not in minutes. Double-digit, I want to be clear on this, double-digit points, not just minutes.
Sorry. So I translated in my head, but I'm happy that you clarified there. Gary, I wonder when we're going to hit the point when we're not talking about fit, when we are talking about fit, not just best player available. Have we hit it yet with Washington at 8?
I don't think so, because if you're the Washington Wizards, you just really need to add the best young talents you can add. And at this point in this draft, I think it is the other Thompson twin, Ausar Thompson, who, of course, played at Overtime Elite with his brother. Like Adam said, was a 2-time MVP there. And so maybe not as thought of as highly as his twin by most NBA front offices, but still undeniably a top 10 talent. And if you're Washington at this point in the draft, I think you've got to be pretty pleased if he falls to you.
Yeah, I love Ausar Thompson. And I love it in this spot, similar to what we talked about earlier with the Portland Trail Blazers with Damian Lillard, now with Bradley Beal. This could spell the end potentially of Bradley Beal if Thompson is the pick here. Because this team, Washington, they're not going anywhere. They're stuck in neutral. This kid can really shoot the basketball. He can come in and start day one. Talk to Kevin Ollie, who I was a part of the committee to hire Kevin Ollie at Overtime Elite. He thinks this kid has an unbelievable ceiling. But again, the same way we talked about Gradey Dick, this kid can really shoot the basketball. He can get to the basket. He's very athletic. And I think this could be an opportunity for Washington to really start all over and really just stay in the lottery for a few more years, trade Bradley Beal in his big contract, maybe to a team like the Lakers, and then add this kid and start building for the future.
Coach, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's what Washington should do. I think if Thompson is on the board here, he's the highest upside prospect left, and it's a terrific value for them. My question is, what does their owner want to do? Because he just fired his general manager, Tommy Shepard, who was only in the spot for 2 years. And the reason being is because he said we didn't make the playoffs. So that doesn't sound to me like an owner who is ready to rebuild. So it's going to be a very interesting scenario here in terms of what they do with this pick. Again, if Thompson is on the board, I think they take him, run with him, and have to be thrilled because I think there's a possibility he goes as high as 3. But everything is an unknown in Washington right now. They don't have a GM. The owner is calling the shots. And Coach, you could speak to this better than I can, but the owner is the most important position in any NBA franchise. And if you don't have stable ownership, you don't have much to work with here. And it sounds like this owner is saying playoffs are bust. And that really is going to set the tone for not only what they do with this pick, but what they do with every decision moving forward.
There's a lot coming. Go ahead, Avery.
Let me just add one thing. Similar to what's happening in Phoenix. You got a new owner that comes in, buys the team, pays $4 billion for it, basically makes the Kevin Durant trade, trades a lot of ancillary pieces, the Cam Johnsons of the world, Mikal Bridges. They lose a bunch of depth, lose in the second round. Coach Monty Williams gets fired. But basically the owner's calling the shots. And I agree with you. That's the same thing that's happening in Washington.
Ted Leonsis is calling the shots now. Ernie Grunfeld was the GM seemingly forever. The last one only lasted a couple of years. They're starting up a new TV network this summer. A lot happening in D.C. Let's move on to Utah at number 9. Gary, who do you have the Jazz taking?
Cam Whitmore, the one-and-done freshman out of Villanova. A lot of the stuff we said about Jarace Walker also applies to Cam Whitmore, specifically as it pertains to his body. You walk into the gym, and he looks different than everybody else. And he looked different than everybody else as a true freshman at Villanova. I remember talking to Kyle Neptune when I worked a Villanova game early in the season, and he said, what's wild about him? Like, you look at him and you think he's been working out seriously his entire life, but he really didn't even lift weights until he got to Villanova. He's just put together like that. And it should be noted that he shot above 34% from 3. Now, that's not Gradey Dick level, but it is respectable for an athlete of his caliber. He's going to be able to play in certain lineups, either forward position, a versatile defender. He's got all the strength you need. He's an athlete. He's an obvious top 10 pick to me.
Yeah, and I think this has Danny Ainge written all over it. When you look at Ainge's drafting history, a power athlete who's explosive, who can get downhill. And GP said it, he really has made strides as a shooter. I can tell you from watching him in high school, he was a non-shooter through most of high school, had good touch, but was not someone who made shots. That really started to develop last year at Villanova. I view him candidly as a high-risk, high-reward type prospect, because if you watched Villanova last year, there were plenty of times where he broke off from the action, kind of did his own thing. You could see the frustration on Kyle Neptune's face. But this is a prospect that, given his ability to get downhill, given that power, that athleticism, he should really benefit from the type of spacing you see at the NBA level. And this is a Jazz program that's a little bit ahead of schedule. It was only a year ago that Danny Ainge came and blew the whole thing up, traded Donovan Mitchell, brought in Walker Kessler, got great value in that. That was in the Rudy Gobert trade. Lauri Markkanen became an all-star. So the front court looks steady. You add Whitmore to that, you've got a power wing who can really complement that group. And again, a high upside player, but one that is going to need to kind of show some maturity in the way he goes about his business and plays within the flow of the offense.
That's Cam Whitmore to Utah at 9. I don't know if any team had a more conspicuous fall at the end of the regular season than the Dallas Mavericks. They end up at number 10, Gary. Who do you have them selecting?
Well, some of their fall was tied to the fact that they were trying to end up in picking in the top 10 of this draft. And so I guess mission accomplished. They didn't have to move that pick out of the franchise. And I've got them selecting Jalen Hood-Schifino, the one-and-done guard out of Indiana. I know that Dallas has publicly stated it's a priority to try to re-sign Kyrie Irving, but whoever knows when it comes to anything with that guy. So he could be there. He might not be there. Either way, selecting a combo guard with size who can play with Luka, I think makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I saw Jalen Hood-Schifino, like we all did, on the grassroots circuit, and always thought he looked like an NBA player from the jump. His shooting percentages, particularly from three-point range at IU, weren't great, but the shot looks fine. He's going to be able to make those reliably in the NBA. You see his ability to get to the basket in these highlights. Obviously, Luka Doncic needs a running mate going forward. And if that's not going to be Kyrie Irving, or even if it is, adding Jalen Hood-Schifino to that franchise is a sensible move from my perspective.
So I got to know Jalen Hood-Schifino just a little bit this past season. Actually covered Indiana and its run in the NCAA tournament in Albany when the Hoosiers got knocked off by an eventual Final Four participant, Miami. Hood-Schifino, his numbers, if you look at him and what he did, you might say, is this a lottery pick? But if you actually watched him play at Indiana the entire season and watched how he grew into just a wonderful Robin to the Batman that was Trace Jackson-Davis, who was the second best player in the sport last season, to Zach Edey of Purdue, you saw in Hood-Schifino a player who never flinched in big moments, who often actually in big games, in fact, a couple times against Purdue, which was, the number one seed heading into the NCAA tournament. You saw Hood-Schifino step up on both sides of the floor, hit tough shots. He's got the ability to shoot from all three levels. There does need to be a little bit more consistency, but he was a relatively good free throw shooter, and at 6'6", 215 or so pounds, I think that projects well. When you get to this part of the lottery, the fact is, you are hoping maybe you strike gold and you get a franchise player. That normally doesn't happen. Maybe you can get a guy who can be a number 2 at this part. That's rare. Really, once you get to this territory, you're hoping the guy that you draft will be able to grow into a good third option. And I think if Hood-Schifino puts it all together, that's exactly what he'll be for a long time in the NBA. He'll be a great number 3 option for a team. I love this pick in this spot.
NBA mock draft after the NBA draft lottery on Tuesday night. The Orlando Magic will pick at number 11 as well as number 6 based on a trade they made with the Chicago Bulls back in 2021. We'll just leave it at that. But Orlando, with their second pick of the lottery, will come at 11, followed by the Thunder, Raptors, and then the Pelicans will round out the draft lottery. Russ Taylor, Adam Finkelstein on set here in CBS Sports HQ. Avery Johnson joining us, Gary Parrish, and Matt Norlander as well. GP, you've been the one leading the charge on these things. We're not talking trades at all, so I know there's a lot of talk out there about what Orlando could do with 2 picks here in the top 11. Let's just say the Magic keep this pick. Who do you have them taking at 11?
I have the Magic selecting with the 11th pick, Keyonte George, the one-and-done guard out of Baylor. Remember earlier in this lottery, I had him selecting Anthony Black, the one-and-done guard out of Arkansas. He's a 6'7" lead guard, so if we're trying to find a backcourt of the future in the 2023 lottery, we can afford to draft a 2-guard who's a little on the smaller side, and that is Keyonte George. He's only about 6'4", but he's a natural scorer. You can put him in pick and rolls, and he knows exactly how to navigate those. The three-point percentage at Baylor wasn't great, but there's enough data on him at the grassroots level and the high school level that shows that he is a competent shooter. So just because he didn't make them consistently in Waco doesn't mean that he's not going to be able to consistently make them in the NBA. He's a super talent, has for years now been projected to be a lottery pick in this draft, and now here we are. Barring a surprise, he will be.
I called 2 of Keyonte George's games in the NCAA tournament. He's going to have to improve on his motor. I would be okay with this pick, especially when you're thinking about building out this team. You're going to take Anthony Black, and then you come back with George to try to remake this backcourt for Orlando. But he's going to have to improve significantly. His last game against Creighton, I think he had 7 points. The game before that, Santa Barbara, 9 points. Just never really got into the game emotionally. Wasn't really dialed in. Is the potential there? Absolutely. Agree with Gary. A little bit on the smaller side. Didn't really show his athleticism as much as I thought he would have. But again, this guy's been well coached by Scott Drew. Drew's had a number of picks. Davion Mitchell, who's playing right now for the Sacramento Kings and had a good run with them. So he knows what a pro looks like. But again, he's got to get stronger, get better, and find that consistent motor. And if he does that, then he has a great potential to play a long time in the NBA.
We've definitely reached the part of the program where it's but about all of these players that we're coming to. Number 12, Oklahoma City. GP, who do you have the Thunder selecting?
Taylor Hendricks, a one-and-done forward out of Central Florida, and this is probably the biggest surprise of anybody who's going to go in the lottery, because if we'd have gone back a year ago, this isn't even on anybody's radar. He was a sub-80 recruit in the class of 2022, but has emerged as a 6'9" athlete who shot above 39% from three on nearly 5 attempts per game. Oklahoma City probably has the best group of young players in the entire NBA, especially given the issues that the Memphis Grizzlies, at least one of their young players, is now dealing with. And that Oklahoma City roster is filled with long players who can shoot, and Taylor Hendricks would obviously be another one of them. Again, above 38% from three, above 39% from three on nearly 5 attempts per game. That is exactly what you're looking for from a 6'9" athlete in the modern NBA, and he would be able to provide that for that Oklahoma City, further provide it for that Oklahoma City franchise.
Well, GP, I can tell you should never take those high school rankings too seriously. The guys who do those just don't know what they're talking about. And this kid was clearly underrated. So, I will say this. I think Taylor Hendricks may be off the board by the time OKC comes around. If he is on the board, I think Sam Presti would jump to get him. He's everything that OKC has valued over the years, and he is a perfect fit in the modern NBA. He is a highly versatile 6'9" defender. If you look at his block shot rate, it's tremendous. He's very mobile. He's a fluid laterally in terms of his ability to defend on the perimeter. And then there's the three-point shooting and vertical athleticism, which you talked about. You know, at the Combine right now, they're measuring how high you jump. What they don't measure is how quick you jump. Taylor Hendricks is someone who jumps incredibly quick. So he's a vertical spacer, he's a three-point shooter, he's a versatile defender, and he's a rim protector. I think that gets him up maybe a few spots higher. I would not be at all surprised to see his name trend in the coming weeks.
We've reached the final 2 picks of the draft lottery. The Raptors have number 13. Gary, who do you have them selecting?
And by the way, I agree with Adam. It is certainly possible that Taylor Hendricks could be off the board by here, and it's also possible this next guy could already be off the board by here. But I've got the Raptors selecting Jordan Hawkins out of UConn. 6'5" guard, can really shoot it above 38% from three, moves well without the ball. Toronto is going through a lot right now, and they're going to need a new coach, and they have now several years away from winning that championship. More recently, in this past season, terrible three-point shooting team. Jordan Hawkins could obviously help fix that.
Tell you what, I saw Jordan Hawkins in UConn practice back in October, heading into the season. And I sat down with UConn coach Dan Hurley, and Hawkins was just getting up some shots. And he kind of sat. He was talking about something else, but like Hawkins was just doing his thing. And he said almost as a side, he's like, listen, if we're going to be like, top 20 team, like it's got to be him. And he's kind of looking over at Hawkins, and he's kind of draining 3 after 3. And I was like, do you think he can? Do you think he will do this? He's like, I really think so. I would expect a big jump out of him. He's a future first-round NBA pick. And I said, okay, are we thinking like, this is going to happen in the next year or two? And he's like, with his talent, it certainly could. Dan Hurley won the national championship, and he needed Jordan Hawkins to do it. That's exactly what happened. These guys know what they're talking about. Hawkins is irresistible. He has amazing free throw percentage numbers. You saw what he can do in helping UConn win a national championship. Though had UConn lost, say, in the Sweet 16, I don't necessarily think that would have bumped Hawkins out of the lottery. I just feel like he should be a lock to go because he was a significant factor. Sanogo was the best player in the tournament, but Hawkins, time and time again, you can just see why he is such a valuable player and such a tantalizing talent, because the shooting form looks great, high release, can hit in all sorts of ways, and is getting better and better. Yeah, he's a little slender in the shoulders and the chest. Like, he's going to have to fill out a bit more, and he is more one-sided in terms of it's more offense than defense. I don't care. At this point, you have someone who could realistically grow into being the best shooter in this draft, and it'll be intriguing to see where he goes. If he is still lingering around here, then any team that's waiting is going to have to pluck him, because you're going to take shooting when it's there, and he is as good as almost any other player we have from mid-range and from deep. in this particular draft.
And we've reached the point now where there are several guys remaining whose agents and hangers-on have all told them they are definitely going to be lottery picks. Only one player left is going to be a lottery pick, and they'll be taken by the Pelicans at number 14. GP, who's it going to be?
Let's make it Cason Wallace, the one-and-done guard out of Kentucky. You know, there's a history of Kentucky one-and-done guards being fabulous NBA players when maybe they didn't show quite all of that in Lexington. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander comes to mind. Jamal Murray comes to mind. Cason Wallace could be the next on that list. He was good, not great, but good at Kentucky. Had some lingering injuries that limited him, but shot above 34% from three, which isn't great, but it is respectable, and there's some substance there that suggests he will be able to improve that. More than anything, he's a positional need for New Orleans. You know, they had C.J. McCollum playing a lot of lead guard this season. He can do it, but it's not ideal. You'd rather push him off the ball. And with Cason Wallace, you've got somebody who could handle lead guard duties and also really, really pressure the ball on defense. I've watched him play for years in the Iverson Classic just before his freshman year at Kentucky, and that is among his best attributes, his ability to ball pressure at the point of attack. He's a special talent. He's got a chance to really help New Orleans turn a corner with that franchise, provided, of course, Zion Williamson ever gets healthy and stays healthy.
Yeah, Cason Wallace is, I think, one of the toughest players in this draft. He's every bit the defender that GP said. The thing that really impressed me this season, having watched him so much in high school, was the strides he made offensively. He was not considered a dynamic playmaker in high school. He was a gritty competitor who essentially willed his way to putting up efficient numbers. But he made strides. He showed craft in the lane as a playmaker. He made strides as a shooter. And as you heard referenced there, sometimes the spacing at Kentucky isn't conducive to playmaking guards showing the best that they can be. That has been a trend over the years. Will that continue for Cason Wallace? We don't know, but I think if he is on the board at this point, someone that the Hornets would certainly have to look hard at, although I do think three-point shooting will be a major focal point for them as they look to build around Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and a roster that they think can be contenders if they can stay healthy, which obviously they didn't this past season.
The draft lottery gave us the order and the teams, and these gentlemen here gave us the picks. That's Adam Finkelstein from 24/7 Sports in studio, Coach Avery Johnson, Gary Parrish, and Matt Norlander as well. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Russ Thaler. That's been our very first post-NBA draft lottery mock draft. And for more from Gary and Matt, check out the Eye on College Basketball podcast. It'll keep you up to date with everything going on in college basketball all season long and get you ready